There we go. Hi everyone, Heather here with astrolotta.com, and I'm so excited to be here with you today for my very first live video here on YouTube with all of you. And today I'm going to be talking about a topic that's really exciting for me. I'm talking about eclipses in the birth chart and how to interpret eclipses in the birth chart and in the natal chart. I thought this would be sort of an appropriate topic considering that we're in eclipse season right now, and those of us who are born during or around or near the eclipses are affected by the eclipses a little bit more so than others. So this is a really potent and important time for those of us who are born near eclipse season ourselves. And not that eclipse season isn't very important and potent and powerful for everyone, but you know, if you happen to be someone who is born on or near an eclipse, you're going to be feeling this energy a lot more than other people might be feeling this energy. So it's a little bit, so it's important to know about. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to show all of you how to interpret eclipses in your birth chart in a way that's very simple and very easy, so you can sort of eyeball it and see it in the chart for yourselves, and that way you can know for yourself if you're born during an eclipse, or you know, if you're friends or family members or clients, if you guys are students of astrology yourselves. And then I'm going to go through and talk about what it really means to be born during an eclipse and all the different combinations that are possible. And then I'll go through the Nodal Access and talk about the eclipses across the different points in the chart. And so yeah, and I'm gonna be going kind of straight through this as much as I possibly can. So I'm gonna try to save the Q&A for the very end, because I know people are gonna have a lot of questions and I want to be able to answer those. I will check on the chat every once in a while just to make sure everyone's doing okay, and you know, that you can all hear me and see me and stuff, because our internet connection's a little slow out here. But for the most part, if you have questions, do your best to hold on to them till the very end, because I will, you know, make sure that I can answer as many as humanly possible at that point in time. Hi everyone, I'm checking on you right now actually. Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Ramiro. Hi, Freya. Okay, so, well, let's get started then, okay? So, people who are born during eclipses, let's start with that. So I know this energy very well because I myself was born just a few days prior to a total solar eclipse of the sun in Virgo. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied. I'm a little nervous. This is my first time being on a video with such a wide audience. But I myself was born during a total solar eclipse of the sun, just a few days prior to it. And so I know very well how this energy plays out. And it plays out with basically people who are born near eclipses, they deal with fate and they deal with karma and destiny a lot. They have these different periods of time in their lives when things sort of shift and your path sort of turns upside down. So you're thrown into a new path and you have to sort of reinvent yourself, reinvent your life many times over in one lifetime. So it's almost as if you're living many lifetimes out in one lifetime. And this is because, you know, that fated karmic destined energy of the north and south nodes is strongest around the time of the eclipses, because what the north and south nodes are their calculations that are basically meant to determine when the eclipses are going to happen and where they're going to happen in the chart. So anytime you have an eclipse, the north and south nodes, which are very karmic energy, and they show us sort of our fate, our path in life, our destiny, they're going to be more active. And so that's something that's happening around this time right now. The energy of the north and south node, the nodal axis in Leo and Aquarius, is much stronger and much more active. So we're being pulled really deeply into the north node in Leo right now. So we're being pulled into a place of coming from the heart and feeling courageous and authentic, and you know, speaking from the heart and connecting with people on a heart level and being more generous and outgoing, and you know, allowing ourselves to be a little bit more vulnerable. And we're moving away from this area of life that's sort of determined by the south node, which would be the Aquarius, which is a little bit more detached on an interpersonal one-on-one level, but more connected to the group. So anyway, that's a little bit beside the point. What we're talking about right now is the eclipses in the birth chart. And so people who have eclipses in the birth chart, they're going to change paths, they're going to change many times in their life. Their lives are going to be very unusual, highly turbulent, very emotionally charged. There's going to be a lot of unusual circumstances that sort of step in. There's going to be these major points in your life if you're born on or near an eclipse where it's like fate or destiny steps in and you have to make a choice. And you know, you could go one way or you could go the other. other. And either way is going to send you on a completely new and different and exciting path in your lifetime. So there's going to be a lot of change, a lot of transition, a lot of turbulence throughout your life. So it's an exciting life to live, but it isn't without its problems, and it isn't without its sort of stresses and turbulence and crisis. I mean, you know, a lot of times people who have the eclipses in their birth chart, their lives are marked by different points of crisis. And, you know, that's just kind of how it is, because we're meant to sort of endure and understand the full spectrum of the emotional experience. And, you know, we're here to live a life that's a little bit unique. And so, yeah, so I'm going to check on you guys real quick in the chat. How you guys doing in there? Hi, everyone. Awesome. Oh, thank you, Marina. Okay, so if you guys are good, I'm going to move on. So I'm going to teach you guys all how you can determine in a really easy way if you yourself have an eclipse in your birth chart. And if you don't have an eclipse in your own birth chart, chances are you know at least somebody who does. You know, I mentioned just a few moments ago that I was born just a few days prior, 5 days prior to a total solar eclipse in Virgo. And for whatever reason, my 3 closest female friends are all eclipse people. They're all born within a few days of either a solar or lunar eclipse. And I tend to attract a lot of clients who are born during eclipses. So, you know, this energy is very familiar to me, and it's kind of strange how we all kind of clump together like that. But also, you know, not highly unusual, because things like that tend to happen. But if you yourself don't have an eclipse in your chart, chances are you know at least somebody who does. So this is going to help you to understand the people in your life a lot better and a lot more easily. And for those of you who do have an eclipse in your chart, which we're about to find out how to look at that just right now, this is going to help you to understand yourself and your own circumstances and all the crazy chaotic events that keep happening in your life. And this is especially important to understand and to know right now during eclipse season, because this is going to affect you way more strongly than it is, you know, other people who don't have eclipses in their birth chart. And so, in order to have an eclipse in your birth chart, first and foremost, either the north or the south node needs to be in a conjunction with the sun. Within 15 degrees is considered, you know, an eclipse. So if you have the north or south node conjunct your sun within 15 degrees, then it is very likely that you were born either on or near an eclipse, either partial or total, depending on the degree. So the closer the degree of the conjunction between the north or south node and the sun, the closer the eclipse is going to be. So that's going to move it from being a partial eclipse at 15 degrees to like an annular or total eclipse at, you know, between 0 and 5 degrees, where there's a total eclipse of the sun where the moon is either eclipsing the sun entirely in a total eclipse, or if it's an annular eclipse is what it's called, there's going to be a ring around the sun, because that's when the moon is a little bit farther from the earth, so it's a little bit smaller from our perspective here. So that makes this sort of cool configuration where you have this big ring. But the strongest eclipse in the chart is going to be the total solar eclipse, and there's not a really good way to tell between the total and the annular by just looking at the chart. You're going to have to, I guess, Google it or something to see if you were born, you know, what the distance was between the moon and the earth, and whether or not it was a total or an annular eclipse. But so first and foremost, like I said, having the north node or the south node conjunct the sun. Second is going to have, you're going to have the moon or either in conjunction or opposition with the sun, or it's going to be within 2 signs or 2 houses of the sun in your birth chart. So that's going to be really easy to figure out. If you use a circular chart, you can just eyeball it. You know, you can also go to astrolada.com and do her birth chart calculator and just look to see if the moon is within 2 houses of your sun or 2 houses of the opposition of the sun. And so I'm just going to give you an example if that's a little bit unclear. So if you were born with your sun in Virgo and you have your sun in an exact conjunction with the south node, let's say, and you were born with the moon in either Cancer or Leo, that means that you're going to be born within a few days of a total solar eclipse. And then if you have your moon in either let's see, Virgo. If it's in Virgo, then it's going to be, you know, very close to the eclipse, if not on the time of the eclipse. And then if you have the moon in, let's see, Libra or Scorpio, then you're going to be still within a few days of that eclipse. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you have the moon in opposition to the sun, so let's say the sun is conjunct the north or south node in Virgo, and you have the moon in Pisces, then you're going to be, you know, born on a lunar eclipse. And if you have the moon within a couple of signs or a few degrees of that, then you're going to be born within a few days of that eclipse. So this is going to be the strongest within 5 to 7 days of the eclipse. The closer you are to the eclipse, the stronger the energy is, but still, if it's within 2 signs, you're still going to be feeling this eclipse energy throughout your lifetime, and it's still going to affect you a lot more. And you're still going to have those fated, sort of destined, sort of crazy circumstances that come out of nowhere, that shake up your life and throw you on a new path. And so in opposition, so let's continue with that example with Virgo. In opposition to Virgo is Pisces. So if you have the moon, let's see, in either Aquarius or Capricorn, then that's going to mean that you were born within a few days of that lunar eclipse. And then also if you have the moon in Aries or Taurus, that means you're going to be born within a few days of that lunar eclipse as well. So that's sort of the spectrum right there. So and I'm going to give you sort of an example in the chart. Let's see what we have going on here. People are commenting when I laugh. That's not the first time, guys. Okay, so I'm going to pull up, let's see if I can share my screen here. Oops, that's crazy. All right, hopefully you guys are seeing this chart here. And this chart that I'm using it as an example as we go through this and we talk about this is actually Donald Trump's natal chart, which I know this might be a little controversial. I'm going to try to keep opinions out of it because, you know, I don't actually really have a strong opinion as far as he goes or politics goes. So I feel like I can be pretty objective when we talk about this, but I am going to be using him as an example because he's very relevant right now because the eclipse that's coming up is going to be happening right on his ascendant. And also because he was born like almost exactly on this blood moon lunar eclipse within like an hour of it. So, you know, I find that to be really interesting, especially given, you know, the circumstances and the time frame that we're in right now and how this eclipse might be impacting him on a personal level. And it's going to be impacting him way more so than, you know, a lot of other people because he was born, again, on an eclipse, almost exactly. And so you see here in his chart, he has, like we talked about, the sun is conjunct the north node, also Uranus. This is a very difficult sun, by the way. And then his moon is in opposition to that. So he has his sun in Gemini conjunct the north node, and in opposition to that he has the moon conjunct the south node in Sagittarius. And I pulled up the lunar eclipse point so you can just see where it is. So, you know, he was born maybe like an hour or two before the eclipse came exact, but it was on the other side of the planet. So it wasn't visible or as strong where he was living at that point in time. But, you know, it was there and it's definitely very impactful. So if he was born, you know, with his moon over here in Capricorn, it would still be really strong. If it was in Aquarius, not quite as strong, but it would still be within a few days. Same thing on the other end of the spectrum. If he had his moon in Scorpio or if he had his moon in Libra, you know, kind of similar thing where it would be not quite as strong, but still there. And then I'm going to give you... Let's check on you guys. Okay, cool. I'm going to give you guys one more example, and this is going to be actually my own chart. So this is a little different because it's farther away. And so for me, I was born just 5 days. So the solar eclipse came exact on September 11th. On the day of my birth, I was born on the year of my birth, and I was born on September 6th. And so you see here, I have a really tight conjunction between the south node and the sun. And then I have the moon over here on its balsamic phase in Cancer at the last degrees of Cancer. So, you know, it's just a few days and a few degrees and, you know, 2 signs away from being a total solar eclipse of the sun. So this is still a really potent and strong energy, but it's not quite as strong as it would be in Donald Trump's charts where it's exactly almost to the hour. And then, you know, again, if it was on the other side of the spectrum, it would be a similar thing. So hopefully you guys understand that and see that. So I'm going to go back to here and give you my face again. Hi. Okay, so hopefully that was pretty clear. And you can also do this by, you know, if you have, again, you always have to have that sun conjunction to the north or south node, but you can do this by looking at the phases of the moon by just eyeballing it, you know, if you're able to do that. If you were born in the balsamic to the new moon or the new to the waxing moon, when you have that sun conjunction to the north or south node, or if you were born on the waxing gibbous to the full moon or the full moon to the waning gibbous, that's going to be the strongest if you were born, you know, during an eclipse like a lunar eclipse. Okay, so I'm going to change pages on my notes here. Yes, I do take notes. I am a Virgo. I just want to make sure I stay on track for you all. I don't want to, you know, go too off on some sort of rant or tangent. So now that we know how to look up and see whether or not we have an eclipse in the birth chart, I'm going to explain to you the meaning behind these different types of eclipses and the different combinations between the sun, the moon, the north and south nodes in terms of the eclipses. And then we're going to go through the axis in terms of the houses in your chart and which houses are being affected, because that's going to be really where you're going to see the most change and transformation and sort of chaos and turbulence in these different points in your life that are very fated and karmic and destined. And people who are born near eclipses, they tend to have this idea that, or this feeling, it's like a deep inner knowing or a deep inner sense that they were destined to do something, or that there's like something sort of greater at play, especially during these times in their lives where they see a lot of synchronicities, a lot of sort of fated circumstances, where things just feel sort of strange and odd, like they were predestined and meant to happen, and where things sort of fall into place in a very specific way. If you roll with the energy, if you have these eclipses in your chart and you learn to sort of move with the energy as it comes up, because it is going to bring a lot of turbulence and chaos, rather than getting distressed or rather than trying to hold on to how things are or how you want things to be, just moving with that energy can be extremely helpful. And it's a lifelong lesson to do that, because that's really what you have to do if you have these eclipses in your chart. You're not going to be able to decide for yourself necessarily with your mind what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. And you need to sort of learn to move with the energy, to follow the signs, to align yourself with the synchronicities and this like beautiful energy that's trying to pull you really into something that is deeply ingrained and embedded in your truth and in your path in life. So this is something that's actually very beneficial, especially if you can learn to let go. And usually what happens is people early on in life, they tend to hold on really tightly, because they don't want this chaos, they don't want this turbulence, and it can cause a lot of suffering and a lot of pain, and it can cause you to not be able to grow and to excel in the ways that you normally would be able to. And so just making sure that you're being mindful of that and that you're allowing the energy to unfold as it will, instead of trying to hold on tightly and control everything. That's really important for eclipse people, and you learn to do that especially with age, and it becomes a lot easier, and you start to just expect these things to sort of happen, like this is how your life is, and you got to kind of roll with it. And it's not a bad thing to have an eclipse in your birth chart. It's actually a very good thing. I see it as very, very positive. Like, you're here for a very specific purpose, and you're going to be guided along the way. So it's special, and it's kind of a gift, I think. At least I try to see it that way, and it helps to see it that way when you are in those turbulent points in time. And so we talked about how to discover the eclipses. So I'm going to go through the different combinations that can be present in the eclipses and what they mean. And so we're going to start with the Sun conjunct Ketu, or the South Node. And so I guess I should backtrack for a second before we need to talk about what the North and South Node means for people who don't already know and aren't already familiar. So the North and South Node, also known as Rahu and Ketu in Vedic astrology, they represent sort of the path that we're headed into in this lifetime and the path that we're moving away from, that we've already sort of mastered and done in previous lifetimes. And so the North Node is the path that we're moving into, and it's something that we really need to sort of jump into and nourish and put energy into throughout our lifetime. And the South Node, on the opposite end of the spectrum, is what we're moving away from. It's where we've already been. It's what feels really comfortable to us because we've already done it. We've already mastered it. I look at it through the lens of previous lifetimes, because that's just, the way that I see things and the way that I understand things. But you can also look at it as like early life experience if that's not something that works for you. But for the most part, it's seen as a past life experience where you've already mastered something. You've probably overdone this energy. You've been there, done that. So you bring a lot of gifts through your South Node. You bring a lot of beauty and gifts and sort of natural talents and natural abilities through your South Node, but you cannot linger there. If you linger there, it bogs you down and things get sort of chaotic and messy, and it just doesn't feel good. It can feel sort of depressing and unsatisfying. And when you move into your North Node, that's where you sort of gain nourishment for your South Node. So if you're focusing on your North Node and you're putting a lot of energy into it, even though it feels scary and you might feel a little bit of ambivalence toward it, and toward that area of your life, you really need to put energy into that in order for your South Node to really work and to flow easily. And so that's just a little bit about the North and South Node and how I interpret those in the chart. And so having the Sun conjunct the South Node, which is your past life experience, that's actually kind of a difficult conjunction to have. It makes it so you feel sort of discontent throughout your lifetime with your success. It can show, discontent with your career, with what you put out into the world. It can make you feel like you're not fulfilling your purpose in life, because the Sun is connected to the soul's physical expression in this reality. So it has to do with your path and your purpose in this lifetime, and your feeling of being successful and your feeling of being purposeful. So if you have this Sun K2 or South Node conjunction, it can, even when you're technically, when other people see you as being successful, you can be recognized by like authority figures really easily for, you know, your natural abilities, your natural gifts, for being really successful in all these different areas, but you yourself don't feel internally successful, and it can be kind of a depressed energy sometimes. And it causes you to feel, you know, not just unsatisfied a lot of the times. And so this has to do with sort of, you know, a past life experience where maybe you were very successful and you mastered the art of being successful and feeling successful and being out in the world and getting that recognition. And, you know, in this lifetime, you take those gifts, so you can still use that, and you still need to use that, obviously, especially when the Sun is conjunct the South Node. You can't just ignore your Sun, right? Like in a lot of times, Western astrologers will be like, oh, you have to, you know, use your North Node and stay away from your South Node. That doesn't work, especially when you have the Sun conjunct the South Node like that. You can't pretend that the South Node doesn't exist, because you need to use that. And it does have to do with your talents and your gifts. And usually people who have the South Node conjunct the Sun, they already have an innate knowing of their path and purpose in this lifetime. They know that there's something deeper and something greater. They have, you know, this spiritual awareness of themselves and the world around them that other people might not have, and it causes them to be really humble too. You know, if they start getting too egotistical, you know, the life will just knock you down and put you back in your place, right? People who have the Sun South Node conjunction know what I'm talking about. So, you know, it's about doing things for a higher purpose, for a higher cause, not really doing it for your own worldly success and recognition. And so if you have the Sun conjunct the North Node, which is a completely different thing, this has to do with pursuing success in this lifetime. It can cause you to feel, or act actually, like really overconfident, and you can be a lot, like that's a lot of energy for people to deal with when you have, you know, the conjunction between the Sun and the North Node, and it can cause people to come across as being very egotistical. It's kind of the opposite of the K2 Sun conjunction, where it's a little bit more humble. It's very egotistical, not necessarily on the inside. Like, these people usually are not very confident within themselves, but they project this confidence, like, whoa. And they can usually be very charismatic, and you know, there's this constant sort of pull to achieve and to be recognized and to have success and to, you know, find your purpose too. That's something with with the North Node Sun conjunction. These people are always striving and trying to find their purpose, to feel purposeful, to connect with their source energy, with their higher selves, with their soul, whatever it is that you want to, you know, personify that as. There's something higher that they're trying to connect with, but they can't quite do it because they don't know how yet. This isn't something they've done in previous lifetimes. This is something that's new and exciting and sometimes scary, and they can feel very ambivalent about themselves and their personal, who they are and their success and what they put out into the world. There can be an ambivalence about it, where at one point they're really, really excited about something, and then the next minute they realize that they got overexcited and this is not the right thing for them to do. So they might pull back and move in and pull back. That's very common with both the North and South Node conjunct the Sun, this like sort of ambivalence and moving forward and then kind of pulling back because either it's not working or because you get overly excited or overly ambitious about something. And then if you have, so then on the opposite end of the spectrum, so I'm going to talk about sort of like the lunar eclipse aspects, and when you have the moon conjunct Rahu. So if you have the Sun conjunct Ketu and the moon conjunct Rahu, and again, even if this is within a few signs, it's still going to be really strong because you're going to be born sort of near the eclipse points. And so having the moon conjunct Rahu or the North Node, this is actually a really interesting and sometimes difficult placement, especially for women. This can be really difficult to have the moon conjunct Rahu, especially when it's on an eclipse. You can have the moon conjunct the North or South Node at any random point in time because the moon, you know, moves through the lunar cycle every 30 days. So once every 30 days, it's going to be conjunct the North Node. Once every 30 days, it's going to be conjunct the South Node. So this is applicable even if you're not, you know, born on the eclipses, this moon conjunction. But especially if you have, you know, this Sun K2 conjunction, this moon Rahu conjunction, you're going to have these really intense emotional experiences. These people live really unusual lives that are very unique and very different. So many ups and downs, so much turbulence, especially on an emotional level. And they tend to either draw these experiences in or like attract these experiences. And if they don't, like, engage in these experiences themselves, life will step in and it'll like cause these really chaotic, turbulent crisis sort of events, because really what you're here to do with the North Node conjunct the moon is to experience the full range of the emotional experience here on this planet. And so in order to do that, you have to experience all sorts of crazy stuff, right? And even the normal mundane day-to-day stuff, they tend to overreact emotionally to these types of things. They tend to have a really crazy emotional expression and experience, and they tend to be a little odd and unusual in their way of sort of expressing themselves and expressing their emotions and interpreting information, because it has to do with your subjective experience as well. So your subjective experience is sort of unique and different and unusual. And you know, a lot of the times people are really drawn into these really turbulent, really chaotic, really crazy situations, because it's almost like they're obsessed with having these emotional experiences on a subjective or like a subconscious level sometimes. Not necessarily always aware of that, but they tend to like move into these experiences pretty readily. And you know, moon conjunct Rahu, especially on the eclipses, you can be so psychic, like having like visions, like seeing entities, you know, all these different types of things, like having really crazy like prophetic dreams, really vivid dreams, especially, you know, strong intuition, strong connection with the other realms, especially when it's near the eclipse. And so this is also a conjunction where you can find yourself having these attachments from like all these different entities and energies. So you have to be really careful, and you have to protect yourself, and you have to be aware of the energy around you and sort of the different entities and beings that you come into contact with, because there are different energies that will attach themselves to you, or that will sort of disrupt you in one way or another. So they're more prone, I would say, to having these weird spiritual attachments or these weird spiritual encounters. And also, you know, it's associated with things like mental illness for that reason specifically, and also because of the emotional, you know, disturbance and the emotional like unsettledness that comes along with it, because you are experiencing such a wide range of emotions. But because of those psychic abilities as well, they're more prone to like psychosis and delusions and all sorts of different things. Not to say that everyone that has this is going to be crazy or like delusional or have, you know, psychotic episodes or anything like that. That's definitely not the case. Not everyone will have this, I promise you, but every so often, you know, it makes people more prone to it. So if, you know, they're not careful, or if there's certain circumstances in their environment that come up that sort of enable that energy to manifest, then yeah, it is more likely. And then I'm going to go to the moon conjunct Ketu, or the south node. So this is also, again, a difficult placement emotionally. So people who have the moon conjunct Ketu, they're going to have sort of that dissatisfaction that we talked about with the sun Ketu conjunction. It has to do more with their emotional experience. So they feel emotionally unsatisfied throughout a lot of their lives. Or they feel emotionally satisfied, but they sort of repress or hold in their emotions, because that's sort of what Ketu does. They're not here to sort of express their emotions everywhere the way that the Rahu moon people are. They're here to sort of suppress them and sort of, you know, hamper down their emotions, because maybe in a past lifetime they were like way, you know, off the wall, like expressing their emotions everywhere. Or maybe they did have, you know, some sort of psychosis or delusions or something crazy go on in their past lifetimes, or they had really traumatic experiences that are very emotionally driven in past lifetimes. So here, you know, they're more controlled in this lifetime in their emotional expression and their emotional experience, but that can cause them to repress emotions, which can cause them to feel sort of discontent and also sometimes depressed. This is associated with depression. Both aspects are associated with different types of, you know, mental illness to a certain extent. So you can feel maybe depressed or unsatisfied emotionally on an emotional level with things that are going on in your life if you have this moon conjunct Ketu. But in the same token, you're probably deeply spiritual, deeply empathic, and you understand the human emotional experience. So you have this deep understanding of your own emotions and the emotions of others. And that can come in very, very handy. You know, you're very able to read people. It's not the same thing as having Rahu conjunct the moon, where, I mean, you still could be very psychic, but it's more about being empathic and more being able to read people and to connect with people and to understand that emotional experience that other people are having. So these can be really great counselors as long as they protect themselves and they don't, you know, attach themselves too much to other people and their emotions and all those types of things. So yeah, I'm going to check in on the chat, and then I'm going to talk about the solar versus the lunar eclipse real quick. Let's see how you guys are doing here. Okay, cool. Awesome. It seems like everyone's doing well. All right, so I'm going to keep going, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. We're getting kind of halfway through right now, a little more than halfway through. And so we talked about all the different combinations with the sun and the moon and Rahu and Ketu. So now we're going to talk about solar versus lunar eclipses. So if you have a solar eclipse, in general, the focus is on endings and new beginnings, especially if you have the solar eclipse conjunct Rahu, the north node. So if you have the sun, moon, and the north node in conjunction, and again, if the moon is within a couple of signs of the sun and the conjunction between the north node, then, this is still applicable. You're still going to feel it, and it's still going to be very valid in terms of your experience with this. But the focus is going to be on new beginnings and jumping into new things and, expressing yourself in ways that are new and exciting and can feel a little scary because you've never done it before. Your lifetime is going to be marked by endings and new beginnings. You're going to be reinventing yourself time and time again throughout your lifetime, which sounds exhausting, but it's also really exciting. You get to experience like a bunch of little lifetimes within this big lifetime. And, so it can be a lot of fun. And you're also, again, very guided by fate, destiny, karma. Things step in, the universe steps in, circumstances step in to sort of throw you on a new path. And there's going to be these certain points in your life, especially near eclipses, and especially when the eclipses are like near important points in your chart where you're just thrown on a whole new path and everything changes, and it's, the end result is beautiful, even if the time in between that is a little bit chaotic and a little bit turbulent and hard, and we only suffer when we hold on to our attachments to things. So, it's about letting go and flowing with that, and just knowing that you're going to start over many, many times in this lifetime. You're here to experience lots of different things. You're not here to just do one path, one purpose, one career, have one, specific emotional experience. It's like all of these experiences that you're supposed to have. And so that's why you keep having these turbulent experiences. So if this is something that's occurring for you, maybe hopefully you'll have a better understanding of why and how this is occurring. And you can kind of know when it's about to come up, because you'll have either transits to these eclipse points in your chart, or there'll be eclipses, happening that are going to be triggering different points in your chart. So like right now you might be having some of these experiences. And then if you have a solar eclipse conjunct Ketu or the south node, it's still, again, reinventing yourself, new beginnings, all these types of things, but the focus is more on endings. It's more on letting go of what no longer serves you so you can move into something new. So the endings are going to be more of the focal point than the beginnings. You're going to have a lot of letting go to do. You're going to have to let go of a lot of attachments to who you think you are in this world, or who you think you need to be, or who you want to be, what you do in order to feel successful, what your career path is, what you put and project into the world. Your soul's expression of purpose in this world is going to change time and time again, because part of its purpose is to experience all of these different new things. So again, it's about reinventing yourself time and time again, but the focus here is more on letting go of the things that are preventing you from moving forward, preventing you from, going into these new exciting experiences that you're really here to experience in this lifetime. So, the endings are going to be way more sort of traumatic and chaotic, and they're going to stick out in your mind a lot more than the beginnings, which is, with Rahu, it's going to be more about the beginnings. And then, if you have a lunar eclipse, that's a little bit different. So that's, your life is sort of a series of these culmination points, these big grand moments where everything sort of comes to a head. And it's like either like a culmination point or a crisis point where something sort of reaches this point where it's like, like everything opens up and it's like, wow, this is what I've been building toward and what I've been opening to. And, so the focal point is more on these points where everything is sort of coming together and you get to see the results of all this work that you put in, but also, it's a lifetime again of surrender and letting go and moving on and, going on all these different new paths and new experiences. And it's going to be way more focused on the emotional experience than it is, having that conjunction with the sun and moon and Rahu and Ketu. When you have a lunar eclipse, it's more focused on the moon. The moon is the focal point. So, it's more of an emotional experience. You're going to be, again, experiencing the full range of the emotional experience. And so when you look back on these times in your life that were very traumatic or very crazy, or your path flipped upside down and you had to go somewhere new and do something completely unfamiliar, the focus is going to be more on the culmination point of that experience and the emotional experience, because that's what you're here to do, is to have that full range of that emotional experience. And then so yeah, I'm going to check. Do you guys have any questions about this so far before I go into the houses? Let's see. You guys are a couple minutes behind me actually on the stream. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to keep going then. And then we'll do Q&A at the very end. So I'm going to do the axes for the eclipses. And then we're going to move on to something different. So if you have the nodal axis, so basically when you look at where the nodal axis moves through in your chart, so it's going to be, you know, on two opposite houses. So wherever you have the eclipse, that nodal axis and that house axis is going to be the point of change and transformation, where things are sort of reinvented and they move in this way that's very fated and predestined, where you have to start over and everything changes over and over again in your lifetime. So that's going to be sort of the focal point of that energy, is going to be, you know, these houses that we're talking about and the themes and the context of these houses. And so if you have this eclipse in either the first house, the seventh house, or both, if your north node and south node are in the first in the seventh house, a lot of this change is going to stem from your relationships and your own sort of personal experience and expressing yourself in this world. So there's a lot of push and pull between your own needs and the needs of the other, your own self-expression and your own need to sort of project your energy out into the world, and your need for companionship and your need for relationship and your need to sort of have someone to walk with in this lifetime, to have some sort of soulmate or some sort of marriage or some sort of, you know, really close connection with people. So a lot of this is going to be focused on relationships. So a lot of major beginnings and endings in relationships that happen over and over again in your lifetime. And then if you have this in the second house and the eighth house, this is going to have to do with money and power. The eighth house is where you go to feel empowered. It's also where you go, where people take power away from you. So it's where people exercise their power over you, and it's where you exercise your power over other people. So there's a lot of power struggles with people who have these eclipses in the eighth and the second house. And a lot of those power struggles can have to do with joint finances, joint resources, or your own ability to create and manifest resources for yourself, and your ability to enjoy those resources. Like some people are here to either you know, really build money and build resources for themselves if they have the north node in the second house and this conjunction happening in the second house, or, you know, they're here to sort of let go of attachments to material possessions if it's a south node thing going on in the second house. But it's a lot about power struggles. It's a lot about money. It's a lot about resources. It's a lot about, it can be about sex. It can be about, you know, things that are secretive and taboo, like the occult. You know, you might be really into studying all these different topics and all this different knowledge, and maybe, you know, certain aspects of this change your perspective, change your life, flip things around for you. There could be like a lot of really like highs and lows when it comes to your financial status. And so, you know, your financial status is going to drive the change that goes on in these other areas of your chart in your life whenever these choice points, these sort of points of change come up. And then for people who have the north and south node on the third and ninth house axis with the eclipses, you're going to have a lot surrounding your day-to-day experience, which is the third house. You know, it's your day-to-day communications. It's things like cousins, like distant relatives, siblings, your community, your neighbors, the people that you interact with on a day-to-day level, and your day-to-day communications and the day-to-day skills that you need to move through the world. And on the opposite end, you know, you have the ninth house, which is about the broader experience. It's about your beliefs. It's about philosophy. It's about religion. It's about the way that you gain like a sense of meaning and purpose in this world. So your belief systems are going to be overhauled and changed time and time again, you know, and that's going to affect your day-to-day experience. And so that's going to be a lot of what's going on with the third and ninth house axis. Also, education can take you on crazy different paths. You know, it can help you to expand your mind in different ways. You can end up, you know, in a foreign country. Travel can be like something that stimulates a lot of this change and transition and transformation and sort of chaos and upheaval. Also interactions with people that are from foreign countries, and also siblings and cousins and you know, those types of family members in your community too. Like interactions with your community can become really intense, or your community itself, like that the people that you surround yourself with, that can change. Your communication style can change a lot, but a lot of this has to do with like your beliefs and, you know, what you believe about the world, what you believe all of this is, your beliefs about God and the universe, and how that sort of drives you to move into these different changes in your lifetime and these different paths. And then on the 4th and the 10th house axis, this one's actually pretty interesting because it has to do with your home and your family situation, and it has to also do with your career and your public reputation. So a lot of these themes that are going to be showing up every time you have these like big transformative moments are going to have to do with where you live. It's going to have to do with your family. It's going to have to do with your like living situation in general. It's going to have to do with property. It's going to have to do with, you know, places you rent, those types of things. And it's also going to have to do with your career and your public reputation and how you sort of put yourself out into the world, and also the way that your bosses perceive you and other people perceive you, and you know, your leadership positions. Like you could very easily with this axis be in a leadership position, but you might not feel satisfied. It might change time and time again. You might, you know, own a company and then, you know, you give it up and you go, you know, stay with your family and stay at home with your family for a little while. So there's the push and pull between these two axes, where you have to sort of move between the two, and they sort of drive this change and this transformation. And I can give you some examples of these, you know, later on as we go through, especially in my own life with the 4th and 10th house axis. I have quite a few of those. And then the 5th house and the 11th house. So you have these eclipses in the 5th and the 11th house axis. That's going to have to do with, well, the 5th house is sort of your creative self-expression. It's the way that you express yourself in the world. You express your energy in the world. It's the things that you love. It's play. It's children. So, you know, having children could be something that's very crazy and maybe traumatic and chaotic that sort of changes your world and flips it upside down. Or, you know, interacting with children or adopting children, you know, all these types of things. Also, you know, the things that you create on this world. So this has to do with like businesses. So if you have your own business, or maybe you're going to own your own business, or, you know, something about that changes your life, changes your world, wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to work for yourself, wanting to do things for yourself. It also has to do with romance. So, you know, you can have a lot of different boyfriends and girlfriends, because the 5th house is boyfriends and girlfriends. The 7th house is more like long-term partnerships and marriage, but this is more like romantic flings. And you could actually have like an affair, or, you know, be someone's like mistress or something with this on here. So there's a lot of like really interesting and emotionally charged experiences that go along with this this energy of this axis. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the 11th house. So that has to do with like your friends, your social networks, your groups. So you might line up with different groups of people that it seems very fated, very karmic, very predestined. And a lot of that change that goes on in your life can stem from this area. So it might be, you know, changing your social networks, changing the groups of people that you surround yourself with, or, you know, something of the like. Where it stimulates a new change, it stimulates new beginnings. So all the new beginnings in your lifetime, not all of them, but a lot of them are going to have these themes. And then the 6th house and the 12th house axis. This is kind of a difficult one, especially if your moon is in the 12th house, because that can, you know, indicate potentially spending time in prison or in an asylum of some sort, or, you know, or on the flip side, in an ashram or, you know, a monastery. It shows that you need to take time out from the world, and that the universe is going to sort of force you to do that sometimes. So you might feel like secluded or solitary for whatever reason. You might have to spend time in solitude because of major change or transformation. It also has to do with hospitals, you know. So these sorts of places and themes can play out every time you have this major change, this major transformation, especially when they're stimulated by the eclipses. And then on the 6th house, which is the opposite end of the spectrum, it's your work and it's your day-to-day work. It's the way that you show up in service of other people. It also has to do with your health. So, you know, health can be a big issue and a big driver for this 6th and 12th house axis. So, you know, you might have health problems that cause you to change your entire life and change, you know, your habits and your day-to-day routines, and the way that you move through the world. And also it might have to force you to change your work or change your job, or to do something where you can spend more time in solitude, because that's something that's going to be really important for you. You need to have a really strong spiritual life and a really, you know, your work life, your day-to-day work is going to be really important as well. So there has to be a balance there. And you're going to get thrown off balance sometimes, but the universe is always going to bring you right back. So, you know, those are sort of the different themes for the different axes in here. And so I'm going to answer a few questions, and then I'm going to go into some examples. So if anybody has questions, I'm going to pull up the chat right now and I can answer a few of your specific questions. Let's see. North Node in 5th and the 11th. What does it mean to have your North and South Node in intercept? Oh, so North and so Miss Leo Scorp Aqua. To have your North and South node and intercepted in the 11th and 5th house. Well, intercepted signs represent energy. So this is, you're probably talking about the Placidus house system, which is what I use. Intercepted signs represent energy that can be repressed, and it's kind of hard to express that energy. So having an eclipse in an intercepted sign is kind of difficult because the energy is sort of repressed until it has some sort of transit to these planets and these points. So, you know, you might have sort of a difficulty connecting with like friend groups or social groups until something comes along, like a transit like from Saturn or something comes across your 11th or your 5th house, or when you have an eclipse in your 11th or 5th house, or you know, something along those lines that stimulates those planets. They can't really express themselves properly without stimulation from outside planets. So a lot of times this energy becomes really repressed, and then it sort of expresses itself like as a burst, all crazy. So you find these points in time probably where, you know, you have sort of new friendships that show up crazy out of nowhere, like all of a sudden all these people are contacting you all at once, or you know, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you get really involved in all these hobbies and interests because you're probably a very passionate person. You probably have a lot of passions and a lot of things that really drive you and you know, cause you to really like move forward and, you know, do things that are very creative and expressive and playful and fun. And you know, you don't necessarily get to express that energy until you have a transit to those planets in the intercepted signs. And what intercepted signs mean, for those of you who don't know, it's when you have a sign within a house system that is not on a cusp. So you have, let's say, like Leo in the 8th house or something, and it's right in the middle of the 8th house, and then on the cusps you have Cancer, or you have what would be the after Leo? Virgo, sorry. So on the cusps of the 8th and 9th house, you have Cancer, you have Virgo, and then right in the center there you have Leo, and it's not on any of the cusps, so it's not technically under the Placidus system. It's not ruling any of the houses, so it doesn't get to be expressed in the same way as the signs that have rulership over the houses. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that was clear. Can you speak of the South Node conjunct the Moon in the 6th house with the North Node in the 12th house? South Node conjunct, okay, so South Node conjunct the Moon in the 6th house. Let me think about that. So if you have the South Node conjunct the Moon in the 6th house, that's going to have to do with a lot about like health problems and really intense emotions surrounding your day-to-day experience and your work situations and things like that. You can have issues with coworkers that come up that are very sort of emotionally trying on you. You know, there can be like a huge range of emotional experiences that go on in your work life, your day-to-day experience. Your interactions with clients and coworkers can become very intense. You know, you can have really intense health situations that come up that you have to deal with from time to time. You have to be really careful with your health if you have the South Node conjunct the Moon in an eclipse in the 6th house. That's like, you know, like, and you can have really mysterious sort of health problems that come up out of nowhere, and doctors are not really able to fully understand. Even the best doctors might be confused about what's going on with you. And a lot of these health problems can be driven from emotions that are stuck in your body, emotions that are not being expressed and that are being repressed, because Ketu conjunct the Moon, it has to do with emotional expression and emotional repression. And so if you're not expressing your emotions properly out in the world, especially when it has to do with your coworkers, your work situation, if you're having a work situation that's causing you a difficult difficult emotional experience, and you're not expressing that, and you don't feel like you're able to express your emotions properly, that can build up and that can cause you to have illness physically. So that's something to be very, very aware of, to make sure that you're, you know, having a healthy outlet for emotional expression, that you're taking time in solitude, because the 12th house is the opposite end of that. So a really good way to sort of deal with health problems, to make sure that you keep yourself healthy and you keep you're functioning properly and all of that, is to spend time in solitude, to spend time in seclusion, to get away from everyone and to just be with yourself, to look inside of yourself, because that's something that's going to be really important in your life, especially if you're someone who works a lot or works really hard, which you might be, because, you know, the South Node conjunct the Moon in the 6th house indicates someone who's really used to working really hard and feels comfortable like working really hard and being in the world and of the world and dealing with the physical, as opposed to feeling comfortable with being, you know, sort of hidden away and looking at the spiritual, the mystical side of things. And so, you know, things like spending time in solitude or working with dreams. You know, anyone who has the North Node in the 12th house, especially with the eclipses, you probably have some really weird dreams. if you're not able to access those, I think it's really important that you do. So you need to keep a dream journal, and you need to make sure that you're, journaling all of your dreams and trying to remember them as best as you can if you don't already have dreams that are very vivid and very sort of unusual and very symbolic and important. Because a lot of times you can be driven by these dreams and led by these dreams into the change that you need to go into in order to move into your path in this lifetime. I hope that answers your question. Thank you, Sally. North Node in the 8th house or Aries. Sorry, I think I missed it. North Node in the 8th house or Aries. So North Node in the 8th house. So if you have North Node in the 8th house and it's part of an eclipse, this is going to be, it makes you very, very psychic. It makes it so you can read people really well, or, that you have this sort of drive to learn about things that like psychology. You want to get into the inner workings of people's minds. It has to do with power struggles like we talked about, sex and death and transformation. So, this is a very transformative place, but it's also very hard because it's also the house of crisis. So when you have, I think you said the North Node, right? Or did you say the South Node? The North Node in the 8th house. When you have the North Node in the 8th house, you're sort of driven to these things that are dark and secretive and taboo, but you're also ambivalent about it and afraid of it, but you really need to engage with that energy, and you really need to explore these different topics. And that could be really good for research. It could be really good for like psychological work, and that could be a really good way to express that energy so it doesn't show up in a way that's chaotic, because your life could be marked by like many, many crises that come up and that are very, very emotionally and psychologically traumatic. And so you really need to find a good outlet for that energy and to express it in a way that's more beneficial. Let's see. Anyone else have any questions? Let's see. North Node in the 3rd house. So we talked about that already. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to just go into the next phase of this, and then if we have more questions, we can do them at the end. So because Mr. Donald Trump has his eclipse on, he was born on an eclipse, a blood moon eclipse, I'm going to talk about him. And we're going to do a little interpretation of his chart. And then we're going to talk about what's coming up for this Great American Eclipse, and what he's going to have, in store for that. So I'm going to go back to the chart. Oop, that was crazy. Okay. So this is Donald Trump's chart. And again, so I don't really have a political affiliation. I think politics is kind of a distraction. It's a puppet show. I don't really pay much attention to it, whatever you may think about that. So, I feel like I can be pretty objective because I don't really know very much about Donald Trump, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously I know some things about him because it's impossible to escape hearing about him in this day and age in the media and on social media and things like that. But for the most part, I don't know that much about him. So I'm just going to read him like I would pretty much anyone else. And I'm going to read for this eclipse in his chart specifically. That's going to be my focal point. And then I'm going to talk about the eclipse that's coming up and what that might bring for him. And maybe do a little prediction. And so Donald Trump has the South Node conjunct the Sun and conjunct Uranus in the 10th house in Gemini. Oh my goodness. This is really difficult. Okay, so he's... First off, the South Node conjunct the Sun, or the North Node conjunct the Sun, like we talked about, is, this really sort of overconfident energy that's projected out into the world. He's not necessarily that confident inside, but he projects this energy of like overconfidence and, can border on narcissism. It's very unpredictable energy, very ambivalent. He can feel really excited about something. And when he says something that he's going to do something, he probably like means it at the time, right? He probably means it. So when he makes promises like politically or, in his business and things like that, he probably actually intends to do them. But, he changes his mind very quickly as well, because that's what, the North Node conjunct the Sun is. It's like this ambivalence. It's like, I feel really strongly about this, then it's like, oh, maybe not. That was not the best idea, because you sort of jump into things. You leap really forward and really hard into something because you're so excited about it, because it's something new and exciting that you've never done before. And so, he gets really excited about things, and he probably makes a lot of different promises that he might not be able to keep because it's Gemini. His brain is sort of scattered all over the place. Also, Gemini, Moon, North Node conjunction in Gemini is a little bit manipulative, for sure. Geminis in general can be manipulative. I love Geminis. I have some really great Gemini friends, but that's sort of the shadow of Gemini, is this sort of tendency toward manipulation and wanting to manipulate other people and to control other people and on a subtle scale, or they'll just manipulate people for fun just to see what happens, play devil's advocate, that type of thing. This also indicates that he probably had a really sort of difficult relationship with his father. He probably sort of admires and idealizes his father and wants to be like him. But you know, having especially having Uranus conjunct the Sun and conjunct the North Node here shows a really crazy and chaotic experience of his father in childhood, where, you know, his father was experienced as probably unpredictable. And, you know, his experience was chaotic, and it caused him to feel like insecure or unstable in some sort of way, where he didn't have that stability or that leadership or that authority figure that he really needed in his life in order to like help him to understand who he was and what his place is in the world, or to understand how to be a good man, you know, or how to, like, you know, act with integrity and those types of things. Because the opposite of Gemini is Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is a sign that rules integrity. It's integration. You know, Gemini is very piecemeal, and you know, it can be deceptive and all these types of things. But on the opposite end, you have Sagittarius, which has to do with integrity. And then, you know, if you look at his moon south node conjunction, and this is where this lunar eclipse came in, so this is going to be really like a focal point for him. This shows that he does not have his relationship with his mother. He probably wasn't very satisfied with it for whatever reason. Maybe she wasn't around enough. Maybe, you know, he had a nanny or something growing up, or maybe he wasn't satisfied with his relationship with his nanny, if that was his primary caregiver or something along those lines. It also indicates that he is actually deeply empathic. You know, he might actually really understand other people and understand other people on an emotional level, but he guards himself and protects himself against that because of his past life experience of having a lot of trauma and a lot of, you know, really intense emotional experiences. Or even in his early childhood, he might have had some really intense emotional experiences that caused him to like close himself off from his emotions. And so when he does express his emotions, he expresses them sort of in bursts, because it's like this repressed emotional energy, and it just comes out, you know, sometimes because it has to. You can't just keep it in all the time, and if you do, it causes illness. But even so, like, you really can't keep it in forever. It's going to come out at some time. So this shows sort of like sort of an unstable emotional expression. It also shows, it indicates, you know, issues with his family, issues with his wife, issues with women. Anytime you have, you know, the South Node conjunct the moon, it could be a dissatisfaction with the feminine energy, with women, with his mother, and with his family life. You know, if he sits around in his family life, if he focuses too much on his family, things just don't work for him in that area, and it can bog him down. It can cause him to feel, you know, depressed or sad, or, you know, can prevent him from moving into his path in this lifetime, which is, he's really here to be seen and to express that sort of chaotic energy and to be successful. And, you know, being in the 10th house, that's really good for being a business person or running a business. He's probably run several businesses in his lifetime, and that's, you know, very typical of someone who has the North Node conjunct the Sun in the 10th house. You know, really driven towards success, material success, and recognition from other people, and wanting to be recognized for all of these, you know, things that you perceive as wonderful that you're doing out in the world. And so, you know, this isn't the easiest thing to have. I kind of feel for him, you know. This is a lot of chaos and a lot of turbulence that comes from his home and family situation that causes him to have to change his path and his purpose and his, you know, fate and his destiny, and everything gets flipped upside down for him multiple times throughout his lifetime. So he might have to move, or, you know, his home, or, you know, something along those lines has problems, or his real estate business, because he's, you know, in a real estate business, and it causes him to sort of have to change and sort of reinvent himself. And on the same side, or on the opposite side of the spectrum, it's, you know, the 10th house as well. So his career and his drive to be successful and to achieve out in the world causes, you know, a lot of chaos and a lot of disruption. It causes him to have to reinvent himself time and time again in this lifetime. And so, you know, that's just kind of, you know, a little bit about Donald Trump and his eclipses in the chart. And so he's going to be impacted by this eclipse, you know, even more so than most people, especially because the eclipse is happening right on his ascendant. And so let's check on you guys real quick. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the chart for the eclipse, which is, this is the Great American Eclipse. It's going to be visible throughout all of America, the United States. And so this is actually a really nice chart. This eclipse, in a general way, it's not that difficult. You know, it is conjunct Mars, so there is going to be, you know, potential for aggression, for violence, for, you know, things that are a little bit frustrating and unsettling, but for the most part, you know, it's in a grand trine. So you have this sort of new beginning happening in this Leo area of our lives where we have to start initiating things, we have to act, we have to move forward because we have Mars here. So it's all about movement, it's all about action, it's all about taking this like new exciting step into something that's like authentic and courageous that we've never done before. So it's all about courage and authenticity and coming from the heart and connecting with people in a way that's a little bit more vulnerable that we're not used to. So we have to be vulnerable during this eclipse. We have to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We have to connect with other people on a deeper level, and we have to take the initiative to act when the opportunities present themselves right now. A lot of people, you know, won't act during the eclipses because there's so much chaos and they're scared and they get frozen. This is not a time to stand still. This is a time to act. And especially for all of you eclipse people, you know, you're going to have to do something because there's a lot of energy, you know, surrounding change and transformation and transition right now. And so, you know, being in this grand trine here, we're going to be required to change. But the change is going to come really easily if we engage with that action energy, that, you know, causes us to change and to act and to do something. So if we're initiating new action, if we're doing something in a way that's more courageous, if we're not caring so much about what other people think about us, because that's the South Node in Aquarius, you know, we're letting go of really caring too much about other people, what other people think. We're letting go of wanting to blend in with the crowd. You know, we're here to like stand up and be seen. And so if we engage with that energy and integrate that energy, we can have a lot of really great change that happens and comes on sort of suddenly, but in a way that's very beautiful. So it's not going to be necessarily chaotic change. When you have Uranus, it can bring sort of difficulties and change that's really chaotic and really difficult when it's in a difficult aspect. But when it's in a trine like this, it's going to come about in a way that's very beautiful. It could be like divine inspiration that sort of shows you exactly what it is that you need to do and whatever it is that you need to change in your life. And then also we have Saturn right here, and Saturn's conjunct Lilith. That's interesting as well. But so making this change, doing these new things, acting more authentically and courageously is going to help us to sort of ground ourselves in this foundation that we're trying to create for ourselves and ground ourselves in our integrity. You know, it's going to help us to build something for ourselves out of our own integrity that's in alignment with our own integrity, and it's going to allow us to expand in that area of our lives that right now is being sort of contracted. And so, you know, we can ground whatever this change is being, whatever the change is, whatever it is that we're initiating, we can ground it into this Saturnian energy where we, you know, we can see the bigger picture, where we can see how we can take it day by day and all the steps that we need to take to make it whatever it is that we want to create. And so that's just, you know, very brief with this grand trine. And the way, honestly, a lot of astrologers are predicting sort of really bad things for Donald Trump, you know, with this eclipse because it's on his ascendant, and I don't necessarily see that. I kind of see this as, it is going to be turbulent, it is going to be chaotic. I do think that potentially that he could have issues, especially, you know, on the opposite end, on the descendant, you know, with his work or with Melania, like his wife or something along those lines. It could cause, some sort of issues with that. But for the most part, honestly, I see this being a turbulent time for him and that being really difficult, and people might be lashing out at him, you know, with Mars coming on his ascendant as well. And there could be aggression or violence or protest against whatever it is that he's about to do, but this is him initiating some sort of new action, and I feel like this is only going to make him stronger, which I know is not what some people want to hear, but I think it's kind of it is what it is, you know. I think people are predicting some really terrible, awful things, and I think that a lot of that might actually be wishful thinking on the part of, you know, some of these astrologers. It isn't going to be easy for him, obviously, but I don't see this being something that's going to necessarily be bad or evil, but it is going to be some sort of change in his home situation. It's going to be a change in his career and public reputation because that's where his eclipse is, you know, in his natal chart. And also because it's, you know, hitting these 4 cardinal points. Anytime you have an eclipse on any of these cardinal points, it's going to change the entire structure and foundation of your entire life. So it's going to change who he is and what he is out in the world. It's going to change the way that he projects his energy out into the world and the way that he is perceived and, you know, viewed by other people. And it's also going to change his relationships, especially his marriage and his partnerships and business partnerships and all these different, you know, sort of collaborations that he's in, you know, deals that he's making with people. That's going to disrupt that. Whatever it is that he's about to do is going to disrupt that. And then also it's going to be a change to his career and his public reputation. So, you know, something might happen. I mean, I don't know. But something's going to happen involving his career. He might have to give up some of his business or, you know, some of the deals that he's made with people or something along those lines. And it's also going to be very disruptive to his family situation. And so, I mean, I just see this being a big major change for him, but I see it throwing him onto a new path, and I see it honestly being probably more beneficial to him than not. If there is anything that's sort of violent or chaotic or bad that happens to him, I think it's not going to happen on August 21st. I think that would happen more after the eclipse, during the aftermath, when we have Mars and then Mercury, you know, coming over the eclipse point. We're going to have Mars coming over the eclipse point, I think, on September 2nd and 3rd, and then Mercury is going to conjunct that Mars, and then it's going to station to go retrograde, or sorry, to go direct on September 5th on the eclipse point as well. So I think that would be a time where things could kind of get dicey for him, if anything. And I do think they will get dicey for him. I'm not saying that they won't, but I don't see this as being his complete demise. This might actually be a strengthening of who he is and what he is. Okay, so I'm going to go back to me. All right. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm about done here. So does anybody have any questions about anything? If you have any specific questions, I'm going to just take a minute to answer that right now. You guys are chatting amongst yourself. There's a lot of stuff going on in this chat. It's hard to keep up. So 3rd and 9th, Freya, you said 3rd and 9th are confusing for you. The North Node and the 3rd, you should learn to deal with siblings, communication, the people around you. Yeah, that's true. The North Node in the 3rd house, you have to deal more with your immediate community and your day-to-day experience. So if you have the North Node in the 3rd house, especially in an eclipse, your community is going to take on more importance, and your day-to-day experience, your day-to-day communications are going to take on a greater intensity and a greater importance. And then on the opposite end, you know, it's going to be really important for you to really spend time sort of learning about different philosophies, learning about different belief systems, traveling, expanding your mind in different ways. Like, you're going to want to really branch out and broaden your horizon. You know, when you have the North and South Node on this 3rd and 9th house axis. So when you have an eclipse on this axis, it's going to have to do, you know, a lot with these themes. And so, anyway, we have a lot of change, a lot of transition, a lot of, you know, crazy energy coming up. And so I wish you all the best with this. If you are an eclipse person, you're going to be feeling this a lot more strongly than other people will. If you're not an eclipse person, you're still going to feel this. We're all feeling it. And if you have any questions, if you missed the live stream and you want to comment below with questions, you know, feel free to do so. I'll do my best to answer as many as I possibly can. And, you know, you can also book a reading with me. I have the link to the reading on the description below, so you can book a reading with me, a one-on-one reading. We can go over the eclipses, if you have an eclipse in your birth chart, or just, you know, what's going on right now in the general astrology. We can totally do that, and I would be more than happy to. And then other than that, I will be doing these videos once every other week. I believe it's going to be on Wednesdays. Normally it would have been, but we had some sort of Mercury retrograde chaos, pre-retrograde shadow chaos that knocked out all of the internet in my area on Wednesday, so I wasn't able to do this. So I will be back next time on, I think it will be August 23rd on a Wednesday, and I'll be doing different special topics in astrology once every other week, because I won't be doing sort of the normal forecasts that everybody else is doing. So, you know, I'm not going to do a weekly thing. We have a lot of really great forecasts. You know, Lotta herself does a weekly forecast. We have April does one. You know, Phil does the lunar forecast. We have Olga, and then we have all these different sort of tarot card readers and psychics that do weekly forecasts. So if you want to know what's going on a weekly basis, you can check there. But I'm going to be doing different special topics in astrology, and I will see you back on Wednesday the 23rd, I believe, in August. And I think we're going to be talking about Aries in astrology. So if you're interested in that, be sure to tune in. All right, bye everyone.